Hi, my name is Kenneth Brunings, and today we will talk about financial incentives, connection agreements, and congestion in distribution systems. As we discussed in the other videos, congestion results from how all network users together make use of the available grid capacity. Today, we zoom in on the individual grid user, more specifically on how individual choices and incentives shape overall network loading. We will compare the advantages and disadvantages of different distribution network tariff design choices in relation to congestion. And we will end by looking at how flexible connection agreements can help connect more users in congested systems. From the perspective of an individual network user, there are two key interfaces with the grid. First, there's the connection agreement. This is the contract you sign with your DSO, often as an annex to the contract with your retailer, which defines how much electricity you can consume, or if you also produce electricity, how much you can inject into the distribution system at any moment in time. Second, there are electricity prices and distribution network tariffs. These determine how much you pay for each kilowatt hour you consume and how much you receive for each kilowatt hour you inject. Together, these price signals influence how you schedule your flexible demands, such as EV charging or storage operation, within, of course, the limits set by the connection agreement. In the rest of this presentation, I will use a simple hypothetical example to explain how different distribution tariff design choices affect network use. To keep things intuitive, I will use residential consumers as an example, but the presented ideas apply to all distribution grid users. Let's consider an area with 3 households. Each household has an inflexible load, a fixed load, and a flexible load, represented by an electric vehicle. In addition, there's a local solar farm. We will use this example to illustrate how incentives affect network use and how flexibility is scheduled. Let's visualize this situation in a graph. In gray, you see the combined fixed household demand. On top of that, you also see the EV charging of the households and the local solar production. The final net consumption, what the grid eventually sees, is essentially the difference between the total household demand and local solar generation. For many consumers in Europe, electricity prices and network tariffs are still fixed and volumetric, meaning that they're expressed in euros per kilowatt hour and do not vary over time. In that situation, consumers have little incentive to shift their flexible loads. As a result, EV charging simply starts when people arrive home, and we observe an evening peak. However, this is rapidly changing as more consumers opt for contracts with dynamic electricity prices. Using the same example as above, we now expose consumers to dynamic electricity prices linked to the price on the wholesale day-ahead market. Since the price now changes over the day, this creates a financial incentive to shift flexible demands, in this case the EV charging, to low price periods. However, these wholesale prices are not always aligned with local grid conditions. Low prices might be driven by generation elsewhere, for example offshore wind, rather than local solar production. And the effect on peaks in network loading then depend on whether these low price periods coincide with moments when the local distribution grid has spare capacity. In some cases, peaks are reduced, but in others they are simply shifted to different time periods or even amplified. Because of increasing peak loads in distribution networks, several European countries have introduced capacity-based network charges. Instead of charging users per kilowatt hour, these tariffs charge users based on kilowatts. Capacity-based tariffs can take different forms. Here, we focus on a simple variant based on the personal peak. Under this system, each consumer is charged based on their highest measured peak over a predefined period, for example 15 minutes. In this example, for the blue household, personal peak occurs around midday, driven by EV charging. Let's now consider what happens when we combine dynamic electricity prices with a personal peak-based network tariff. Dynamic prices encourage charging during low price hours, while a personal peak charge motivates consumers to spread their flexible demand within those hours to avoid creating large peaks in their offtake. However, because this network charge is not linked to local conditions, periods of local solar injection are not directly signaled to consumers through the tariff. And as a result, consumers may spread consumption into time periods that are not necessarily optimal for the local grid. In some cases, they may distribute their offtake outside the lowest price windows, potentially increasing electricity costs for consumers. To address these issues, several countries are experimenting with time-of-use variants of volumetric and capacity-based network tariffs. For simplicity, many of these time-of-use network tariffs follow fixed patterns, predefined blocks of high, mid, and low network fees throughout the day as shown here. This motivates shifting demand towards the low network fee period and ideally improves network utilization. However, the impact on peak network demand again depends on how well these fixed time blocks match local system conditions. If they do not, for example because local solar generation is limited in that specific network, new peaks in network utilization may emerge in unexpected time windows. So where does this leave us? For now, many systems will continue using simple, region-wide tariff designs. At best, they combine elements such as time of use, volumetric, and capacity-based charges, together with dynamic electricity prices. Looking ahead, however, we should prepare for more dynamic approaches. This includes tariffs that do not only vary over time, but also across locations, so that distribution fees better reflect local network conditions. In addition to tariffs and prices, DSOs have another mechanism to prevent congestion: alternative connection agreements. These do not change the electricity price or the network tariff itself, but rather change how connection capacity is offered to consumers. The idea is based on a simple observation. Congested distribution networks are typically only during a limited number of hours per year operated close to their technical limits. If we want to guarantee a new client the same capacity throughout the year, this connection agreement must be set to a level that is safe even during those rare stress moments. In this example, that means a connection of 1 kilowatt. But during most hours of the year, much more capacity is available. Alternative connection agreements aim to unlock that capacity. For example, by offering contracts that guarantee full connection capacity only a certain share of the time. This allows the DSO to reduce the connection capacity of a client during the limited periods when the network is under stress. In this video, we looked at how individual user incentives shape congestion in distribution grids. Using a simple example with a few households and local solar, we showed how fixed volumetric tariffs can create evening peaks, how dynamic electricity prices can motivate a shift of demand to cheaper hours, and how capacity-based tariffs can discourage peaks in consumers' offtake patterns. We also discussed why time-of-use tariffs with fixed patterns can create new peaks in network loading if they do not match local network conditions. Finally, we explained how alternative connection agreements can unlock more grid capacity.